So we're into the book of Revelation. I have to tell you that the part that we've dealt with already, the 7 churches, I kind of see as a preamble, a prelude to what the book is really about. And as you looked at the 7 churches, do you remember kind of the general formula of what he tended to say to the churches? There were 3 parts, basically. 1, here's what you do pretty well. 2nd, I have this against you. And 3rd, here's the promise ahead of you. Here's where the divine is at in the midst of all this. Okay? And so what he's essentially saying is no matter who you are, whether you're this kind of dysfunction or this kind of problem, this church over here or that church over there, wherever you're at, God has something for you, something that you're doing well, something that's not going quite right, and a promise for you. Okay? Do you see? That's really important because it's not saying, it's not condemning anybody to hell. Because this book is not a condemnation book, no matter how much it's been used that way. It's a book of challenge. It's a book of saying, how are you right now going to be, and here's the critical word, faithful. And for each church, faithfulness meant something different. Because the dysfunction, the way that they had missed the mark, was different for each church, as it is different for each one of us, right? How I fail in my attempts to find and follow the divine is different than how you're going to fail. And if I try to place what I am struggling with wholesale on top of you, I may not be speaking your language at all. So what we have to figure out is how to trust each other in trying to figure out faithfulness. So for you right now, I want you to take just a second and introduce yourself again so that everyone remembers you. And I want you to say at least one thing that is your current struggle of how to faithfully follow the divine voice in the world. Okay? So we're going to start with Earl.
This is Earl Mason.
And what's one of your current struggles to follow the divine?
Oh, I think I have a constant struggle just to keep things in order and keep myself on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. All right, Sandy.
Yeah, I'm Sandy Mason. I think just remembering to be so grateful and thankful every day and not take things for granted.
Yeah, it's hard, especially when we're in difficult spaces like isolation from each other, to remember to be grateful, right? Because you see a lot of stuff you're not grateful for. Thank you. Garnet?
Well, sometimes I have challenge with to absolutely, unequivocally love my daughter-in-law, a daughter-in-law, who has a hard time with me and won't really explain to me. So that's, and that makes it hard. So yeah, hard to turn around and just love when I'm not being loved.
Yeah. If it helps at all, you let her know that there's others of us that kind of struggle with how to love you. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
She'll love that. She'll love that. Especially here in the country.
Sorry about that.
No.
Ron, how about you?
Actually, just let me tell you this. I'm really struggling with the whole thing. It takes me back to being a teenager and reading the late great Planet Earth and all the things which I walked away from.
Yeah, and you should struggle with all of that, Ron, because they do the wrong job of interpreting this scripture, this whole book. Don't believe what Hal Lindsey said about the book
No.
of Revelation.
Yeah, it's been a long off. Yeah. So.
All right. Today, as we go through today, and I set up how I think John was trying to write to us. Hopefully, it will help you. Okay. Those 7 churches, for example, people use it to be able to batter each other around. You're the church of Pergamon, and you need to repent in this way. That's not what it's about. It's calling people towards, not battering them about. But people on a regular basis use this book to batter, and it's not its purpose. It's an encouraging book. It's trying to say, how is it that I can help you to be the person you feel like you're supposed to be, the person that God calls you to be, the person who you were created to be? Do you see the difference? And when we use it to yell at each other, that's not its purpose. I don't think it ever has been, but it's the easy way people use to corrupt the teachings of the book. Does that help?
A little.
Okay. Don't believe the Hal Lindseys of the world. The late great Planet Earth is not a right way to do this. We'll get into it more later. Peggy, tell me about your stuff.
Well, I struggle. It's kind of what Garnet was talking about. I struggle with people who call themselves Christians in particular, and tell me that I'm going to hell because I haven't been saved.
Yeah. That's because they use a very narrow definition of what it means to be faithful. The good news is you don't have to believe them, but you got to figure out what it is that is standing in your way, right?
Yeah,
And maybe
I
it
need-
is them and whatever
Yeah.
residual voice they leave there.
I need to figure out how to love them despite the fact that they've condemned me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a tough job to do. Joyce,
is.
how about you?
I gotta unmute me because my printer is printing away here.
Okay.
I struggle with listening. I just don't take the time to listen like I should.
Yeah, I assume you mean to everybody but me.
Well, and you included.
Okay, all right. Just checking.
I have another question too.
Yes.
That Peggy just brought up for me. Can you get unsaved?
That's a huge question that has
I
been
mean-
asked through the history of humankind, all right? Because there's a group of Christians that are once saved, always saved, and they have ideas that way. But here's the bottom line. I don't think our job is to be saved. Our job is to live in the salvation of God. I think it's something that's already there and given and perfect, and it's trying to draw us towards. It's not something that you have to obtain. All right? It's something it's more something that you realize.
Yeah. So many people can name the date and the hour and the minute that they became saved.
Oh, yeah.
And
Because-
all of a sudden, it just dawned on me, well, I wonder if you can get unsaved once you've been saved.
Yeah. Well, at least all the men in here can.
Oh.
Oh my, okay.
All right. Bob, how about you?
Can you hear me okay?
We can. Wonderful. We've
It's
had
been
a hard time getting hold of
it's-
Bob's audio. So I'm glad.
It's been a struggle. Well, I don't have a book or a problem with the Book of Revelation, and maybe that's something I might want to look at, because once I make up my mind, I'm on the path that I think is true, and I've been led by John Shelby Spong, and now I feel that he's got the right message for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much I am really truly open to any other interpretation of the Bible maybe it's like a cult.
Yeah.
I get
John
caught
Shelby
up in
Spong has a good new way of being able to view our relationship to Scripture, though, and that's what's important.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm struggling with, well, there's two things. Actually, one is that I'm not sure where the Spirit's leading me. I have a problem with that. I kind of put myself in charge of my life, and I feel I'm doing the right thing, and I don't look beyond that.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I might be closed to other opportunities. The other thing is, you remember the Lutheran Church went through the split over the gay issue a few years ago, and our congregation lost the pastor and 250 members.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones who rejected the idea of being a reconciling church, and so they left our congregation, our building, and went somewhere else, and now they have their own. They were really good friends of mine when they were here. They were the kindest people I'd ever met, and many of them were leaders. They were all the volunteers who did the work and who gave the money. And I know that's the good part of them, but I can't get over the other side.
Yeah.
And I'm having trouble being open to them, being a friend or wanting to be around them anymore.
Yeah.
I did Bible study in many of their homes for a number of years before the split. So that's my struggle in accepting people that don't think the same way I think and on that subject. So that's where I'm at.
I think what you're describing, Bob, is one that a lot of us are struggling with. And to be frank about it, they might be struggling with the same thing about you in reverse.
I'm sure they are.
Right? How do we how do we value somebody who we disagree with? How do we see God valuing that person when we disagree with it? When my path doesn't lead me the same way as your path?
Yeah.
All of those kinds
I
of
have that same struggle with politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And but that's what happens when if we look at the preamble and we look at those 7 churches and we say only one of them is a faithful church, and if you're not like that church, then that's the very reason why John placed that in there, I believe, to be able to say you can't judge your church by what that church is struggling with. You can't you've got to give a broader definition of where people are at and how to become that faithful thing. All right. For me to be able to say, in order to be faithful, you have to do this, may not define at all the place where you're at and how to move forward from that place. What is the next right choice? What is the next faithful choice? If I'm trying to tell you from my perspective, it may have nothing to do with your perspective. But that's what we do on a regular basis. We make them into singular ideas. And that's not what this book is about. There are a couple of singular ideas, but they are very broad, and that's what we're going to get into today. The reason why people do that, though, is they interpret this book incorrectly in 2 different ways. First of all, they call it a book of prophecy. And prophecy it is, but not in the way that we typically think it is. I grew up with an amazing prophet. Okay, her name was Mom, and she would say things like this: "If you keep doing what you're doing," and then she'd enter in what would happen. That's what prophecy really is. It's trying to read the things and say, this is the problem that's ahead of you. This is the challenge that's ahead of you. This is why you need to adjust your life. What we turn prophecy into is this type of thing. And can I just tell you, we have been consistently for thousands of years wrong whenever we use prophecy this way. Every single time. When we say in the year 1923, on November 27, this will happen, and we try to fit days and times and hours to it. We try to say God is telling us a fixed thing, then we use prophecy wrong. The Bible, and I think the divine, show us types of, not specifics. And when we try to use it the other way, we hurt each other. So Ron, that's part of what Hal Lindsey tries to do, for example, is he tries to set specifics where God is not placing specifics, where John in the book of Revelation is not placing specifics.
Can I bring up something specific?
Yes.
So in one of the letters, it seems to be, at least from what I've read, this comes from a Jewish Christian, and he is criticizing those people who eat meat sacrificed to idols, and which is direct contradiction to Paul. So we have the other side of Paul's argument.
Yeah.
And both sides each said, you're heretical. So John, at least part of this, is saying this is awful. And, those who read from Paul's were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, happens throughout Christian history.
That's right. Because we very often do that. Partially because we try to give a specific to that. Did John, when he said, don't sacrifice something to idols, was he talking literally or metaphorically? And I believe that as a general rule, John is talking metaphorically. Are there other things that are drawing our hearts away, that are drawing our sacrifices, our time, our money, our whatevers, instead of where it would be best utilized? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so I can fail in the same way that in the opposite way of how you can fail. If I'm trying to place my thing on top of you, then it may have no meaning at all. Joyce, did you have something to say?
I did. I put my hand up.
Yep, I saw that.
Okay, so I think it's both metaphorically and the other one.
Literal.
Actuality, literally.
Uh-huh.
The way I heard or was taught about Revelation was that it was kind of written in code to the other churches, but written as a story as to what had happened or what was going to happen. What had happened.
Okay, so let me tell you. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, that's okay.
Okay, let me tell you first of all, and we need to really get to this because this chapter, these next two chapters, will really help us in this pursuit. But let me disabuse you of one thing. Just like it's not really a book of prophecy in the ways that we think it is, it's also not a book in code. I think it is a very open book, an easy book for both Christians and for the Romans to understand. Okay, when he talks later on about the great whore, I don't think there was a person that didn't know that was the Roman Empire. Okay, he's not talking in hidden terms. In fact, the book, the name of the book, Revelation or Apocalypse, both mean an opening up, a showing, not a hiding. But we interpret that as a hiding, as a code thing, in order to do this. I know something you don't. And that's always wrong. That's not what John is doing. He is being very open about things. Okay? So that's a second way that we misinterpret this. Thirdly, I think we miss the very point of what John is doing here. This book is a book of worship. It's a missal, a hymnal, a way to be able to guide us into a space that allows us to be in a different space than what we typically live in. That tells us a bigger story, a larger story than what we typically have, which is what we try to do in celebration, isn't it? Okay, here's what you're going through today, but let me tell you more than that is true. Okay, so what we try to do in education is we try to give a bigger picture than just the singular that life may do. Peggy.
I was waving to John and Diane.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, it's good to see their faces, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm glad we've got them up there. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you remember those 3 points, it helps. That it wasn't written as a hidden book, that it isn't a book of prophecy as we know it, but as a set of warnings and help to be able to sort through things. But most of all, that it is a book of worship. So we begin with chapter 4 today, and it goes like this. Let me get it here for you. After this, I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open. And the first voice, which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Do you see right where he starts? He's not saying, "Come up here and let me hide things. Let me show you hidden things." He's saying, "Let me show you everything." He says, write it all down. It's all there for you. At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne, with one seated on the throne. And the one seated there looks like jasper and cornelian. And around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. And around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the throne are 24 elders, dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their head. Coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder. And in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches, which are the 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne, there is something like a sea of glass, like crystal. Around the throne and on each side of the throne are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The 4 living creatures are like a lion, the second creature like an ox, the third living creature with a face like a human face, and the 4th living creature like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and inside. Day and night without ceasing they sing, "Holy, holy, holy, the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Now, Bob, you come from a more liturgical church than St. Francis. That last little piece down there, do you recognize that at all?
Not in our liturgical service. I go to the Saturday evening service, and we don't have a liturgy.
Okay. In more liturgical churches, those words are sung almost every single time. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. And it's a very typical thing. That's liturgy that was written 2,000 years ago, that we continue to use.
Mhm.
Why? Because this book was meant to be a liturgical book and to lead us through a story and help us to know and understand things differently than what we've understood them before. It's trying to help us become. So let's go back and see what's going on here. We have a throne, obviously the throne of God, the one seated on the throne being the divine one, right? And there's jewels around, huge jewels, a rainbow that looks like an emerald. Do you see what's happening? He's saying this is more magnificent than I can really tell you about. And then he begins to tell about the creatures that are there. The 24 elders, each seated also on a throne. Now 24, what do you think that might be? You were going to guess. Think of it this way. It's 12 plus 12.
Mhm. Disciples?
The apostles.
That's half of it. The 12 apostles, the 12 disciples, the Peter, James, and John, the ones who walked with Jesus. Now who are the other 12?
12 tribes.
12 tribes of Israel. That's exactly right. Right? All the ones who formed the core of who the children of Israel were. Okay, so Old Testament 12, New Testament 12 joined together that are seated around the throne of God, that are all there with God, all tied together into a big knot. All right. Now he begins to talk about the sevens. 7 is used a lot in this. Here's what you need to know about 7. There's a reason why to this day it is still the luckiest number. Why in casinos it is used as the number where you win everything. Okay, it's because deeply rooted in all of Western civilization, 7 has become the most important number, the luckiest number, because in ancient Israel it was the number of God. Okay, so anytime you see 7 or some kind of manifestation of 7, or later on we're going to talk about how in the book of Daniel they use 3.5, which is half of 7. There's a reason why that's there, because it's somehow referring to a relationship to 7, the divine. That makes sense? So if you know that, that helps interpret a whole bunch of stuff. He's saying, here is God present with the 7 spirits, present. God present, present, present. Okay? The next thing you have is 4 beasts. All right? 4 beasts described as a lion, an ox, a human, and an eagle. I used to walk out a door on a regular basis with those 4 beasts on them. It was at First Church Phoenix. Sorry, I'm going to get right there. I'm going to show you the picture of that door. It's kind of a cool picture. Let me get there. This is what it looked like. Lion, eagle, human, ox.
The
Can you
4
see that? What?
The 4 Gospels.
And it's usually interpreted as the 4 Gospels. Now, this was an important image that he had because he's trying to reinterpret something else. Okay? Daniel was the first one to use 4 beasts. And here was what Daniel said about the 4 beasts. In the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream. I, Daniel, saw in my vision by night the 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. Try to hear both some similarities, but what you're going to hear mostly is differences. The first was like a lion who had eagle's wings. Then as I watched, its wings were plucked off and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a human being, and a human mind was given to it. Another beast appeared, a second one that looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side, had 3 tusks in its mouth among its teeth, and was told, arise, devour many bodies. After this, as I watched, another appeared like a leopard. The beast had 4 wings of a bird on its back and 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this, I saw in the visions by night a 4th beast. They don't even name this beast, the type of animal it is. It's just terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth and was devouring, breaking in pieces, and stamping what was left with its feet. What's the difference between these 4 beasts and those 4 beasts? The 4 that John tells about.
They devour, and they aren't. Don't they represent empires? Previous
That's
empires?
exactly right. The typical thing that Jewish scholars had been telling each other and continue to tell each other, as Christian scholars do, is that these are great empires, right? And they try to fit who's who, and they try to say, oh, this is this one and this is that one. It's not really as important whether or not this is the Greek Empire or the Roman Empire. It's that there are empires that devour.
Yeah.
And what are the 4 beasts doing in our story of Revelation? Notice he starts off exactly with the same one, a lion in Daniel. So that you clearly saw the ways that it is that he's paralleling. And what do the beasts do in this part that we've already seen? They're the ones who sing, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. They are worshiping the one who sits on the throne. Right? Instead of being the devouring things, the destroying of the power against, they are there in a space looking up in awe at the divine one. See the difference?
Mhm.
He's taking the images of the past and he's bringing them and saying, that's not the truth. Because the whole of this book is to tell you that what is happening in your life right now is not the truth. How many know, for example, that COVID virus is not the ultimate truth of your life? But how many think it feels like it right now? Right? It's so present and so life altering that it feels like it has all truth to it. It is a beast like that of the Old Testament. But what this book is trying to tell us is that that story isn't true. That there's a better story that you need to remember. Now, having said that, I have to tell you that this book starts with a premise that you may and may not agree with, at least perfectly. But it ends with an assumption that I believe you believe well. So the premise is this: you may not understand all of this, but God does. You may not be able to control all of this, but God can. And I don't believe in a deterministic God that has everything already fixed and everything already decided and everything in place. But I do think there's power in being able to say what is outside of your control is inside of a larger control. Because here's the assumption, that together our faithfulness, not just mine and not just yours, but also the divine faithfulness, together can build a new world and can carry us from the worst point to the best point. That's what this book is about. Do we allow us to be able to see the positivity of this rather than the negativity of the moment? Do we allow ourselves to believe in a God that carries us all beyond, or that does whatever God can do to condemn some and only save a few? Because it's used a lot of times in the negative sense, and that's not its purpose. Its purpose is to show the positivity of what God is and what God is doing. However you interpret that God, whether for you it's another being, or it's that tendency within all of us to be able to move towards, it's about that which tells a deeper and a longer story than this moment. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's what's being worshipped here. You don't have to believe exactly the premise that John starts from to believe what he's trying to tell us. That there's a bigger story. That's what we have to hold on to. Okay? The bad part is the next point that John makes, no, not the next point, but a point that he makes very clear within this, is that things are going to get worse before they get better.
Ah,
So don't expect tomorrow everything to be roses. Don't expect everything to be perfectly the way you wish they would be. Just keep being faithful. Keep believing in that larger story, that broader story, that grander story in the midst of all this. Because that will help you be faithful when right now you want to not be. And by not be, I mean this. I think I've told you how I'm struggling with my cousin Bob.
yes.
Bob is not my favorite person right now. The things he posts and the way he posts them just bug me a lot. my job is to say, but what's the larger picture? What do I have to do to, in this moment, believe in that larger picture, not just the fact that this post by Bob is stupid? And how do I faithfully step into that space? Because sometimes faithfully means that I refute him and I argue against him. Sometimes it means that I just ignore him. What in this moment carries me to the best space and maybe helps him to get to a best space, not just what in the moment is the most satisfying. Okay, does that make sense? That's what this book is trying to help us to do. All right, so let's go on to see what else he says here. All of this that I've got right here that I'm telling you about, these are important things, and you'll be able to get to send that to me if you give me your email address, and I make sure we do this. So here I've compared the 4 creatures in Revelation, the 4 creatures in Daniel. In the book of Daniel, where it introduces all of these people, then it talks about this thing right here: a time, 2 times, and half a time. And it talks about that a lot. A time, 2 times, and half a time. If you have that up, it's 1 plus 2 plus 1/2, which is 3.5. Half of what number?
7.
You're just in the middle of things, and there's a long time to come before you get to perfect. So don't expect right now to be the divine, at least in the perfect sense of that. It's going to take a while. And how many want a magic wand God? How many would appreciate if God acted that way?
No.
That's why a lot of people take this book and turn it into a someday my prince will come book. Jesus is going to come down and suddenly fix everything. That's not what this book is about. This book is about you in the midst of things not being perfect, continuing to do what you have to do. People try to take the Bible all the time and try to make it say something it doesn't say. This book is one of the biggest places where people do that. They try to turn it into a book of magic. If I just understand the right incantations, I can fix it all. If I just know that tomorrow God is going to come down in a rapture, then, and it's not that type of book. It's about what are you going to do when that's not happening right now. To start off, it gives us a great promise. This passage is the key passage to understanding the whole of this book. And if you do not understand this passage, you will not understand what John is trying to tell us. Chapter 5. Oh, look, here's what somebody said about prophecy. This is from an article about in Wikipedia about the book of Daniel. The prophecy has proved notoriously difficult for readers, despite it having been the subject of intense exegetical activity since the Second Temple period. For this reason, scholars continue to follow James Allen Montgomery in referring to the history of this prophecy's interpretation as the dismal swamp of critical exegesis. Because we continually take and interpret apocalyptic literature wrongly, horribly wrong. This verse that this set of verses that I'm going to show you will help you to interpret this whole book better. Here's what it says. Then I saw in the right hand of the one seated on the throne a scroll written on the inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. 7 seals meaning divine sealing, right? From God. This scroll is going to set much of the tone for the rest of things. It's going to reveal what's going to happen. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I began to weep bitterly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. You see what's happening? Here's this scroll of God, which will reveal and help everything become clear and will draw us towards, and no one can open it so that we can learn from it. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." See those images right there? The Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David. Very powerful, extremely powerful images, mimicking that of the beast, right? But the lion that is from the root of David, that is clearly in the side of the ones that God has been with and will continue to be with. Powerful, strong images. But then look what happens. Then I saw beneath the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders a lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered. Do you see the juxtaposition that just happened? We're looking for the great lion, the deep root. And what God gives us is a lamb who has been slaughtered. Gives us from the very strong to the very weak. Essentially to say that what you think is going to happen isn't what's going to happen. You look for images of power, and you need to look differently. Power is one of the things that works against, I believe, spirituality.
Yeah.
To achieve a right spirit, you have to let go of the need for power. You have to step into a space of trust, of openness, of something different than what it is you have. Our God doesn't work, as a general rule, by striking thunderbolts down from heaven. That's how the Egyptian gods worked, or the Norwegian gods, or whatever other gods worked. They were beings of power. Ours is a very different image. A lamb looking as if it had been slaughtered. Looking as if it had no power at all.
But 7 horns and 7 eyes.
Sure, everything's in 7s, but here's what's really important about it. The question that's being asked is what? I'll go back to the scripture so you can see it. Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seal? It says, here's one who is worthy. He has taken the scroll, the 4 creatures, the 24 elders, and each sing a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll. You are worthy to open its seals. See, there's a manifestation in the world which can open that which is true, but it's not found in power. It's found in willingness to move into a different space. The lamb, of course, is imaging some of the ideas of Christ being slain on a cross, Christ being willing to go the hard road of life. But it's not narrow. It's not just that type of thing. It's also where else in the weakness of life can we be grace, hope, love for each other? It is saying it's not in the grand, powerful images and actions that the world is changed, but in the relational, loving images. You see the difference? Now I want you to think back on how you've heard this interpreted before, whether with Ron, it was through Hal Lindsey. Are they interpreting this through someday my prince will come and conquer the whole thing? Are they showing that type of image, especially if it becomes any kind of an onward Christian soldiers type of image? We're going to go and we're going to beat their...
But
Or is it in a space where we love? Because what John is showing here is a space of love, not of military imagery.
that's radical.
It is radical. But that's why people misinterpret this all the time, is they interpret it through all the things of political power, military force, all the economic, influence, all the different ways that we typically have power.
Mm-hmm.
And what John's saying is that's not what does it.
Right.
We believe in the power of love, that will change things.
Mm-hmm.
A weak looking force, but that's what's going to hold everything together and draw us towards that which is greater.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that's primary to all of this? If you want to understand Revelation, you have to divorce yourself from the images of power that we typically almost unconsciously place on top of all of our stories. That the one with the most, the biggest force wins.
Yeah.
And John is saying, that's not the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
If you miss this passage, this part of the thing, then you read the whole rest of the book incorrectly. This is the primary image that allows us to understand and follow what John is trying to tell us.
Mm-hmm.
God loves, God is active, and God is not the lion, at least in the way we want him to be. He is a lamb, works in a very different way in the world. There you have it. Did I answer all your questions yet?
I have,
Yes, Ron.
and maybe this is for next week and beyond, because you have that image, but then you have what Luther said, there's no Christ in it. You have the Jesus that said, put away your sword, Peter, and then he's leading an army.
Yeah.
And wrath is being poured, and how do we get past that image? Because that's definitely the image of power and brutality in the name of the...
If you remember this, then when you get to that, it will make more sense. Because the question you're asking from the very same image of what you've been told in the past. That God is bringing an army that's going to do the very same thing that the armies we have do. And the army that he ultimately has does not do things the way our armies do. Okay? Frankly, onward Christian soldiers is a heresy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Being the soldier of God, where I get to go beat the bad guys' butts, has nothing to do with the imagery that's in Revelation. And yet we continually write that because it's easier from everything we've been told before. And so as you go along, Ron, I think you'll see that the reason why it seems like that's true is because we can't easily divorce ourselves from all those things we've been told in the past. This is telling a whole different story about that. So as we go along, I think you'll see that it'll change and be better. Okay.
Yay.
All right, guys, thank you very much. If you gave me your email address, I will send my notes for today. I'll send them right out to you. So you've got all those things to look at. Next week, we'll start talking about what happens when the seals are opened and what goes on in the midst of that. Okay?
I'm gonna give you my email address.
Yeah, yes, before you leave, Earl, give me your email address.
Okay, it's EMASON
MASON
58203 at yahoo.com.
5830203
58203.com.
at Yahoo. Okay,
Thank you.
I will put that on there. Is there anybody else whose email address I don't have yet? I have Peggy's, Bob's, and Joyce's from today. John and Diane, do you want?
Yeah, my name is on. Do you need my email address? You've got that.
Yes. There's two different ways you can do it. If you want to, down at the bottom of your screen, there should be a chat space. Do you see that? If you just click on that, you can just type in your email address right there.
Okay.
You see that? If you'll do that, then I'll get all this information out to you. Do I have everyone else's? I have Peggy's, I have Ron's, I think I have everyone's. All right. Thank you, my friends.
All right, thank you.
Jim.
Thank you.
And
very much.
hello to everyone whom we don't see anymore.
I will tell them that. One of the best things about these classes is I get to see people.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks, Jim.
See you now.
Jim,
Bye-bye.
Jim, is the video on from this afternoon's class that I missed?
I assume so. I forwarded on to Karen, and she usually doesn't take very long at all to get it on.
Okay,
So I assume so.
okay. Very good. Hopefully, I've had people here, both classes that I usually come to, so
All right.
hopefully next week will be better.
Good. All right. Take care, my
Thank
friend.
you.
Take care. Good night.
The meeting.